Welcome everyone to CEC's webinar series. Community Environmental Council is recognized as the 2020 California Nonprofit of the Year. And we at CEC advance rapid and equitable solutions to the climate crisis. And this webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to the recording after. And all the other resources will also be available on CECSB.org. This is an active session and your engagement is welcome. We invite you to add questions into the Q&A during the presentation, and we have Jen, my colleague, who will be answering some of them, and then we'll also be doing a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We also have a support team with Jen as well as Iris, who you'll see as one of the panelists, and Sarah, who is monitoring the chat and the Q&A. And so welcome. Community Environmental Council is a nonprofit organization. We were formed in 1970, and we work entirely on energy and climate issues. And I'm really excited to be talking with you today. My name is Michael Chiacos. I'm Community Environmental Council's Director of Energy and Climate Programs. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics today, electric vehicles. I've been an EV driver for about 8 years now with 2 different EVs, and I'm excited to share some of my experiences and expertise. So, our first poll is up, and we'd just like to know a little bit more about our audience. Who's interested in purchasing an EV or leasing one, or maybe you're here just to learn. Maybe you already have an EV. So we'll give you a moment to answer the poll. And there's over 70 electric vehicles, different models available in California, both new and used. On the screen, you can see just some of them, everything from small sedans to larger sedans and cars to crossovers and SUVs and even trucks coming out. So it's an exciting time to be interested in an electric vehicle. And it looks like over half the people are interested in purchasing an EV, 7% leasing, 16% maybe, but I don't know where to begin, and 17% I'm here to learn, and then 11% of you already have an EV or hybrid. So electric vehicles are very important because transportation is a huge part of our greenhouse gas emissions. You can see here in this pie chart that about 41% of California's greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. But really it's about 50% of our emissions, because a large chunk of this industrial emissions is actually from getting the oil out of the ground and refining it. So in many people's individual households as well, transportation is about 50% of our emissions. And what that means is that everything else that you do in your life, all the different choices you make, could be equal to how much you drive and what you drive. So electric vehicles and driving less are a big part of the solution, and that's primarily what CEC's transportation program works on. So by getting into an electric vehicle, you could go from an average 5 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year in an average gasoline car to 0 or 1 metric ton, so a huge reduction. And to put it into context with some everyday things that you may do, we've heard about eating meat is a big climate impact. Eating a cheeseburger is about equivalent to driving a gas car about 10 miles. Manufacturing an iPhone is equivalent to driving that gas car 200 miles. And a long flight, which is the easiest way to burn a lot of carbon, is equal to about 3,800 miles. So transportation is extremely important. And electric vehicles, along with driving less, it's best if you can get out of a car, but then get rid of a gas car too and switch over to an electric vehicle. And so EVs are a big part of the solution because they're extremely efficient. You can see this fuel economy label, over 100 miles per gallon equivalent. That's 3 times more efficient than an internal combustion engine. If you think about it, with an electric vehicle, there's very little of the noise, there's none of that pollution coming out the back, very little heat. All that is wasted energy in a gasoline vehicle. Electric vehicles also don't even have a tailpipe, so there's 0 tailpipe emissions, which is very important, especially in urban areas where there's a lot of air pollution that causes asthma and other respiratory diseases. And for carbon emissions, an electric vehicle reduces greenhouse gas emissions per mile about 75% on California's very clean grid. And increasingly, California has more and more renewable electricity. We have a goal to get to 100% clean electricity by 2045. And many agencies have even faster goals, including here in the Tri-Counties with Clean Power Alliance and Central Coast Community Energy, with goals to have all renewable electricity by 2030. So that means an electric car will actually get cleaner as it ages, whereas an internal combustion engine actually gets dirtier as it ages, because the emissions components start to fail and it creates more smog, as well as our oil sources are getting dirtier. All the easy oil is gone, and now we're getting into fracking for oil and cyclic steaming and tar sands and much heavier, dirtier oil. And then one of the most exciting things about an electric vehicle, which we'll talk about, is how you can pair solar on the roof of your house and experience true emission-free driving, what we call driving on sunshine. But it's not just about all the environmental savings, it's also a lot of monetary savings and a lot of fun. Anyone who's been in an electric car knows about that EV smile, which is the amazing torque that electric vehicles have, and they're quieter, they don't vibrate as much. It's just a much better driving experience. In fact, most EV drivers, when they drive a gas car, feel it's just kind of archaic and would never go back once they've tried electric. You can also save a lot of money. So with an electric vehicle, you can charge your car at home or using public charging, sometimes as low as $1.70 per gallon, or even less if you have solar. So that's less than half the cost of gas, and there's even a lot of free charging stations around. So we'll cover all of these things in detail a little later on, but there's also reduced maintenance. So the County of Alameda did this study, and they found there was about half the cost in their fleet vehicles, because you don't have to change your spark plugs or change your oil. There's no oil changes needed. Even your brakes, you save a lot because there's regenerative braking. When you brake, some of that energy goes back into your battery. But Consumer Reports also came out with a very comprehensive study last year, and they found that they did surveys on hundreds of thousands of Consumer Reports members, and they showed that EVs and plug-in hybrid drivers pay half as much to repair and maintain their vehicles. Consumers who purchase an electric car can expect to save an average of $4,600 in repair and maintenance costs over the life of the vehicle. So quite a savings that Consumer Reports found. And we're about to talk about all the cars, but I just wanted to mention that electric vehicle sales are really increasing rapidly. There's over 2 million EVs have been sold in the US. And here in California, we're almost at the million mark. We're going to pass 1 million electric vehicles sold this year. And you may have also heard about Governor Newsom's gas car ban. After 2035, no more gas cars will be sold new in California. As well as President Biden has an executive order and a goal for 50% nationwide of vehicles sold to be electric by 2030. So here in California, in recent years, we've been at 8 to 9% of new vehicle sales being electric. That's these last few bars. You can see the very last one is just the first half of 2021, and we're seeing explosive growth with electric vehicles this year as more and more models come to the market. And we're just going to see continued faster growth in future years as prices are really coming down. And this isn't just being driven by California and the US. Globally, Europe and China are actually way ahead of most of the US and are really driving electric vehicle sales. So global automakers are making electric vehicles for global markets, including the United States. So now we're going to get into the different type of electric vehicles. And I'm wondering, are you interested in a new vehicle, leased, used, or you're not sure? So take a moment to answer that poll. Iris, do you have the results? So it looks like 43% new, 9% leased, 18% used, and 30% not sure. All right, well, first we'll talk about the used electric vehicles. The most affordable ones are typically all electric, kind of first generation electric vehicles. Many of these are 6 to 10 years old, and you can purchase them very affordably for $5,000 or $10,000 and experience all those benefits that I told you about of reduced cost for fuel as well as maintenance. So for $5,000 to $10,000, many of these vehicles, they have a limited range. So they can go 70 to 100 miles and then need to be recharged. And so for most people, this wouldn't be their primary car if they just had a one-car household. But for people who have 2 or more cars in their household, you could easily get rid of one of your gas cars, swap in one of these electric vehicles for all your commuting or around town driving. 70 to 100 miles of range. Most people don't do a lot less of that in one day. You could charge it up at your house at night, and could be a very easy way to test electric vehicles at a very affordable price point. So out of the used electric vehicles, the one that you'll find the most of is this one in the top right. This is the Nissan Leaf. It was the first electric vehicle on the market. It's been out for over 10 years. So there's a lot of them over the last 10 years. Down at the bottom right, you have the Ford Focus Electric. And then you have in the bottom left, the white one is a VW Electric Golf. And then this one over here in the top left is the Fiat 500 Electric. So again, lower range, first generation electric vehicles, great for around town driving to replace a gas vehicle if you have more than one car in your household. Or if you don't do a lot of driving, you could try replacing just for one car. Most people though would, perhaps if you only have one car in your household, choose a plug-in hybrid. So a plug-in hybrid has an electric range of 20 to 50 miles, and then a hybrid gasoline engine kicks in. So you can do most of your around town driving all electric, experiencing all the benefits we talked about. And then if you go on a longer trip, the gas engine kicks in, you get 40 to 50 miles per gallon with gasoline. So this is a really great option for people who are in a one-car household or who aren't sure about all the charging and just want to dip their toes in the electric vehicle world. These used EVs can be found for $8,000 to $15,000 and anywhere from 3 to 10 years old. The one in the top right is the Chevy Volt. And I myself had a Chevy Volt for 6 years. And so often I would go a month without using a drop of gas if I'm just using, driving it around town, less than 40 or 50 miles. Even if I drove down to Ventura, I could use charging stations down there and come back without using a drop of gas. But then if I wanted to go to San Francisco or to the Eastern Sierras on a trip, then I could have that gasoline engine kick in. So in the bottom are 2 plug-in hybrids from Ford, and then the Toyota Prius Prime is in the top left. So all these plug-in hybrids are a really great choice for one-car households or people who aren't so sure about the charging and the smaller range EVs. Now we're getting to the new electric vehicles. Many of these are second generation pure electric vehicles that have ranges of anywhere from 250 to 400 miles. And they could really be a replacement for a one-car household, or for people with the two-car household, they could try a full electric vehicle. You can even go on a road trip with it, as I'll talk about in a little bit. Here in this pricing 20 to 40,000 is after incentives, which we'll talk about. But in the top right is the Chevrolet Bolt. This is one of the first very functional all-electric vehicles, around 250 miles of range. The next one, the gray one, is a Nissan Leaf, the second generation of it. Some of these have ranges from 150 to over 220 miles. And this vehicle can actually be purchased under $20,000 after incentives. So you can get a new electric vehicle for the same price as a Toyota Corolla. In the bottom, the two white ones are from Tesla, the Model Y, their crossover, and the Model X, their SUV. Definitely more expensive electric vehicles, very capable, could take you anywhere you want to go. The bottom left blue one is Toyota's plug-in Prius. This one is so these vehicles that I'm showing you are some of the top selling electric vehicles. This is the only plug-in hybrid that's one of the top selling ones. Gets about 25 miles of electric range and then over 50 miles per gallon when it's in gas mode. And then in the top left, we have the Tesla Model 3. This is the best-selling electric car. They've sold over 1 million of them now. And it's pretty amazing that now you can get a Tesla for around $37,000 here in California after the incentives. So these are some of the new EVs and plug-in hybrids that are available. There's many more. As I mentioned, there's over 70 vehicles on the road, but these are some of the top selling ones. Here are some of the new electric vehicles that are just coming out now or in next year. The top right is Toyota's RAV4 Prime plug-in hybrid. So I believe it has around 35 miles electric range and then really great mileage when it's in hybrid mode on gas. You have the Polestar, the white one, is the new electric car from Volvo. The bottom left, we have Ford's Mustang Mach-E. I've been seeing a few of these around town. It's a crossover SUV. And then we're seeing trucks that are starting to come out next year, including the F-150 electric truck, Tesla's Cybertruck, very polarizing and futuristic design, and some new vehicles, SUVs from Rivian, a startup that is also has a contract for 100,000 electric vans with Amazon. So some new options that will be hitting them, that are either out now or hitting the market next year. I also want to mention about hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are also zero emission vehicles. They don't need to be plugged in, so that you can't charge them at your home, but you would charge them at different hydrogen fueling stations, which are, we have one here in Santa Barbara, there's one in Thousand Oaks, and then many also in LA and San Francisco. So they have the similar advantages as a gas car in that they have a higher range of an EV and faster refueling. The downside is you can't charge them at home, as well as there's limited hydrogen stations. I think there may be more than 41 now. This slide might be a little old. They're around $50,000, so a bit expensive, but there's some great leases that are available on them. And someone who just purchased a used fuel cell vehicle told me you can get a 3-year-old fuel cell vehicle for around $15,000, certified, pre-owned, and also has 3 years or $15,000 of free fuel. So that's a pretty great deal, particularly if you could consider a hydrogen vehicle if you live in an apartment or don't have access to home charging. The used ones seem like a really good deal. They are less efficient than a pure electric vehicle, so around 67 miles per gallon equivalent for this Toyota Mirai, the Honda Clarity, and this is the Hyundai Nexo. So less efficient. You know, my bet, if you have access to home charging, is to go full electric. They're more efficient, they're more affordable. But hydrogen fuel cell vehicle could be a good option if you don't have access to home charging. Now we have a virtual ride and drive. This is National Drive Electric Week, and we have from Plug-in America a 5-minute video of someone showing off their Chevy Bolt. So check it out.
Hi, my name is Paul Pansella, and I'm a longtime faculty member at Western Michigan University, talking to you from Kalamazoo. The idea today is that I'm going to give you a little overview, share some of my experiences with driving a Chevy Bolt electric vehicle. Okay, so I'm taking you into the back wall of my garage. This is the equipment I use to charge my car in general when it's parked overnight here in my garage. What I have is a open EVSE charging unit, level 2. Came in a kit form, so I got it pretty cheap. It doesn't have any fancy Wi-Fi communication or anything, but it does have a timer so that I can set it to only charge during off-peak hours, which the electric company appreciates. Plugs into this standard 240 volt outlet. Overnight, I would take the handle out of the receptacle here on the wall. This is the cable from the charging unit. I would come over to the side of the car, open up the charge door, and just plug it right in. Right away I get to see that there's a light on the dashboard flashing green. Tells me it's running, tells me it's charging. And at this rate, on my level 2 charger, I'm getting back about 30 miles of range for every hour that I'm charging. Here's a driver's view of the main instrument panel behind the steering wheel. And over here, the infotainment display. The display has different modes so that you can decide how much information you want or how much is too much information. Here's the most basic mode. The green bars on the left. Over here, that's functioning as your gas gauge. The number that goes with it, 122 miles in this case, is the car's best guess at how many miles you can still go before you're empty. When we're driving, it'll tell you how much power you're using, whether you're using power or regaining power because of regeneration. Okay, here we are inside the car, and we're gonna start up. All you do is put your foot on the brake, push this button. No key is required as long as the fob is inside the car. And now we'll get going down the road. I'm going to get on the interstate highway and we'll see how fast it accelerates. Okay, so I'm approaching the entrance ramp now. And I'm going to now kind of floor it. So this is not a golf cart. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. I also want to say a few things about how the car handles in the winter. We've had no problems. I do put snow tires on it, but because of the weight distribution, I think the extra weight of the batteries, it feels very sure-footed whenever there's snow. You do get a little bit less efficiency in cold weather. That's true for gasoline cars as well as electric cars, but you kind of notice it more with electric cars. In our very worst cold weather, you get about 60% of your very best range on a full charge. This particular car, having 240-mile estimated range, estimated by the EPA, it's plenty for almost all of our driving. We don't have to worry about range except when we're going on trips. But you will notice in the winter that you will have to charge more often. Hi.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that virtual test drive. Now we'll get back into the presentation talking about incentives. People always have a lot of questions about incentives. And I'm going to give you the overview here, but I would really encourage you to go to electricdrive805.org to really learn a lot more. There's all the links to these programs. You can click on them, read the different program details. So the various incentives. Oh, and there is a poll here. And let's see, Iris, do you have the table? Maybe we missed the table. So we're asking if you're eligible for larger rebates because there's some additional rebates that are available. And the rebate cutoffs, they're for low to moderate income households. So it's about $50,000 for one person. I believe about 70 for 2,000, 86,000 for three, 106,000 for a family of four. So if you are at or under those numbers, you would qualify for an enhanced rebate, the first selection. If you make up to $150,000 per year, you can qualify for the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, which we'll talk about. And if you make over $150,000 for a single filer or $300,000 for a married filer, you're not eligible for the rebates, but could still get the carpool stickers. And you can also, if you're not sure or prefer not to state, you can pick that one. And this is confidential that we're just using for some of the grant requirements we have to see what the audience of our webinars are. So it looks like about 12% qualify for the enhanced rebates, 43% for the clean vehicle rebate, and then about 36% not sure, prefer not to state. Thank you. So the first one is the federal tax credit, and this is up to $7,500. It's the biggest rebate. This is a tax credit that you get back on your next year's taxes, and you have to have at least $7,500 of federal tax that you're going to pay. So typically this would be people that are above moderate income. And if you think about your last year's taxes, your total amount of taxes you paid, not your refund or how much you owed, but your total amount that you paid on your tax return, you could get up to $7,500 of that back. One way of getting it back sooner is if you bought an EV tomorrow, you could change your withholding on your taxes so that the federal government doesn't take out as much money, so you don't have to wait till next year to get all of that money back. So that's a federal tax credit. You can learn more at electricdrive805.org and follow the links. There's also a rebate from the utilities, SCE or PG&E, and this is called the Clean Fuel Rewards. If you get a new vehicle, it's $1,500. It will be given to you as a point of sale discount at the dealer. So when you go in and negotiate your car purchase or lease, You ask the dealer if it's not there, what about my $1,500 clean fuel rewards? And they'll knock off $1,500 off the price. If you buy a used vehicle, you can also get this, and it's $1,000 through Edison. There's also a rebate from the state of California, and that is $2,000 for an electric vehicle or $1,000 for a plug-in hybrid. And like we mentioned in that poll, that was to get you thinking. If you have a low to moderate income, you get an extra $2,500. So for a family of four, that would be an income of $106,000. You would get $4,500 on an electric vehicle lease or new car purchase. If you are lucky enough to live in 3CE territory, or you may have heard about the new Central Coast Community Energy. It's the new purchaser of electricity for most of Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County and further up north. They have a special program where you can get $2,000 off an electric vehicle or $1,000 for a plug-in hybrid. And if you are income qualified, then the rebates are doubled, and you can learn about that grant rebate on 3CE's website. There's also another program for lower income folks, low to medium income folks, but it's paused right now. But it would give a $5,000 grant to purchase a new or used electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid, and it's called the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program. And so if you don't have money saved up for a down payment but really need a car next year, you could try to investigate this program. So there's a lot here to say about the incentives. I really encourage you to go to electricdrive805.org so you can see all the incentives there, click through to the actual programs, and read the fine print and learn about how they work. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different types of charging. It's kind of complex because there's 3 different types of charging: level 1, 2, and level 3 fast charging. So level 1 is a trickle charge, and you can see this portable charger just plugged into a normal 110 outlet. And so that's level 1. You get 3 to 5 miles per hour. And I know you're thinking right now, wow, that's really slow. Why would I drive somewhere and charge that up? Well, you're really just going to use trickle charging at your house overnight while you're sleeping. And so you could plug in your plug-in hybrid or your electric vehicle. If you drive less than 50 miles a day, you could just get a full charge overnight. And it's a very low-cost way of charging an electric vehicle. I did it myself with my Chevy Volt for 6 years, and many people already have a level 1 outlet in their garage or in their driveway, or could easily add one near where they park their vehicle. I think if you have a plug-in hybrid, level 1 charging is totally sufficient. But if you want to charge faster, you can also get at home a level 2 charger. This one here on the left side is a public one in the city of Santa Barbara. And now there's almost 1,900 public charging stations on the Central Coast. So in Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties. So these charging stations are all over the place. But you can install level 2 at your house. Most EVs would charge at 20 to 30 miles. So what this enables you to do is drive your vehicle all week, maybe charge it up once or twice a week, and plug it in to charge it up for 4, 6, 8 hours, and to get a full charge overnight or in the middle of the day. And actually, if you are at home in the middle of the day, the best time to charge your electric vehicle is actually between 10 and 2. 10 in the morning to 2 p.m. because that's when California has an abundance of solar energy on the grid, and you can soak up all that solar energy, and it's when it's the highest amount of renewables on the grid. particularly on weekends when there's less demand. So I just charge my full electric vehicle once or twice a week, usually on a Saturday or Sunday if I'm at home. And it's a really great way to use up a lot of that renewable electricity. There's also level 3 fast charging. There's almost 300 fast charging stations in our 3 counties. And these are 480 volt power, and they're very fast. So even that the older, $5,000 or $10,000 Nissan Leaf, many of them can fast charge. They'd get about 60 miles in 20 or 30 minutes. So what that means is that instead of just using your Nissan Leaf around town, you could take it to a neighboring city that's 50 or 60 miles away. So if you lived in Thousand Oaks, you could drive to Santa Barbara, enjoy your day, stop somewhere for a coffee or a lunch break, charge up in that half hour and be able to make it back to Thousand Oaks. There's also even faster charging stations that are now available. Some of the fastest ones are Tesla's superchargers. These can allow your Tesla to hit up to 1,000 miles per hour. That's very, very fast. In reality, you'd get about 200 miles of range in about 15 minutes. So this enables you to go on a longer road trip and not worry about charging your vehicle. So the other thing about charging your vehicle is that you can get access to very affordable electricity rates. So this is Southern California Edison's prime rate. It's a time of use prime, it's called. And what that does is allows you to charge your vehicle 19 hours out of the day for only 17 cents per kilowatt hour. And a really good rule of thumb to know about is that if you just add a 0 onto your cents per kilowatt hour, it's about equivalent to what you would pay for gas in a gasoline car, roughly. So 17 cents a kilowatt hour is like paying $1.70 per gallon for gas on a cost per mile basis. And so with the electricity grid, we have plentiful electricity. It's just that at peak times is when it's most expensive to keep all of our electrical capacity going. So with this rate, you can charge anytime at night, anytime during the day. So from 9 p.m. at night to 4 p.m. the next day, you just want to avoid charging your car between 4 and 9 p.m. In many houses, your electric car will use as much electricity as your whole house, depending on the size of your house, of course. So if you can charge your car off peak, you could save a lot of money, even if some of your house use happens during that peak time. But you can also shift many of your things, like if you have a pool pump, have it work in the middle of the day, take advantage of that solar energy, or if you have a heat pump or your dishwasher, things that you can program or just run at the least expensive time of day. So with charging, I mentioned that there's 1,900 public charging stations in our 3 counties. This is a map of just the city of Ventura, so you can kind of see where the charging stations in Ventura are. But there's maps like this for every community across the world, and you can look up your own community on plugshare.com. I'll have links to this at the end of the presentation. Typically, though, you aren't going to use the public charging stations in your own town. You're going to use the ones in other towns when you go visit them, unless you don't have access to home charging, and then you will may use public charging or charge at your workplace. So we have a poll about charging. Do you have access to charging at home now? Either a 110 or 240 volt outlet. So if you have a dryer plug, or if you have a shop where you have 240 volt outlet already in your garage, or you have an EV charger. Home possible with upgrades, like you may not have an outlet near where you park, but you could probably get it done. Or do you not have charging at home, but you have charging at work? if you work at the County of Santa Barbara or UCSB, many employers now have a lot of charging stations that allow people without home charging to charge. Or would you be reliant on public charging? So if you could answer the poll. Looks like 58% already have access to home charging, 29% possible with upgrades, 17% charging at work, and then 18% would be reliant on public charging. So I actually think that if you have access to charging at home, driving an electric vehicle is actually more convenient than driving a gas car for the vast majority, maybe 350 days out of the year. Because you can just charge it at home. It takes 30 seconds. I charge up once or twice a week at home. Very convenient. You don't have to go to a gas station. When you go on a longer trip though, it can be a little less convenient. And I'm gonna tell you about my electric vehicle road trip. So I mentioned I had a Chevy Volt for 6 years. And then about 3 years ago, my wife and I got a Tesla Model 3. And last summer, we took a pandemic road trip all the way to Utah. We went 3,000 miles in about 2.5 weeks. We took the car down dirt roads, camping, national parks, all the way to canyonlands and arches and all over the place. And it was amazing to see how far electric technology has progressed, that now you can do this long road trip in an electric vehicle. And this is because of Tesla's supercharger network, but the fast charging network for all the other electric cars is rapidly improving and allows people to do road trips. In fact, one of my friends traveled from north of Seattle down to Santa Barbara in his Chevy Bolt a couple years ago using the fast charging stations. Usually with going on a trip, so if you were going to from, say, Santa Barbara, where I live, to San Francisco, you'd start out with a full charge, and then maybe after 2 or 3 hours of driving, you would time it to stop with a lunch break. So you could charge up for 20 or 30 minutes while you grab some lunch, charge up to 80 or 90% and get on your way. Further than that, you could also, a couple hours later, stop for 10 minutes to quick charge. And it's a very easy way to do longer trips. So road tripping in an electric vehicle is entirely possible now. I won't lie to you, it's not as convenient as going to a gas station because you have to plan out, but most of the cars actually tell you where you're going to have to charge. So you could say, I want to go from here to Utah, and it would tell you exactly where you need to charge along the way. So I think that if you have access to home charging, being able to charge at home, being so convenient for most of the time, and then now it's possible to go on longer trips with an EV as well. So we're getting down to the end of the presentation. I'll take some of your questions in a few minutes, but I wanted to talk a little bit about combining solar with your electric vehicle, because there are very synergistic technologies that could save you a lot of money on both. Here's a little case study on Jeff and Mandy. So Jeff was driving from Santa Barbara to Ventura and back every day, and they had a small home with a utility bill of only about $30 a month, but they were spending about $300 a month on gasoline for his commute. And they didn't have a big enough bill to go solar, but they realized they could go solar, have a bigger bill so that they could get a solar array that would pay off faster, and then they wouldn't have to buy gasoline anymore. And so they went from $805 a month of those expenses to $560 a month. And while he leased his electric vehicle for $260 a month, so he didn't own it at the end, he also took a loan on his solar for $300 a month. And he owned his solar at the end of the years. So the cost or the value of his used vehicle that he leased and then didn't get to have versus the cost of his solar array after the loan was paid off is about equal. So we said it's exciting to make such a huge change and have it make total economic sense. And then we also have Tim, who's a financial advisor at Edward Jones. And he found out that 2 kilowatts of solar, so that's about a little less than half the size of this array on his roof, which is enough for his house and his car. And for 2 kilowatts of solar, you can get it for about 6,000 and enable to drive your electric car for 12,000 miles a year for 25, 30, 40 years, as long as the solar lasts. So it's pretty amazing that you can put these solar panels on your roof and have a home charging station for only $6,000. What would be the cost of 25 years of gas? If you're paying $2,000 a year, that's $50,000. And so Tim calculated his annual rate of return from switching to solar and an EV at better than 20%. Given the warranties and production guarantees of the panels, Tim sees the decision to go solar as a risk-free investment. And in this day and age, there are no risk-free investments, particularly one with a 20% annual return. So we had Gloria Soto, who's one of the Santa Maria City Council members and a new EV driver, here to talk with you for a few minutes about her EV experience. Unfortunately, she had a family emergency that we just heard about, and she can't attend the webinar. So I want to highlight electricdrive805.org again. This is a coalition and a network of CEC as well as the school districts of Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and some other partners. Great resource for everything EV that you want to learn about locally. And we do many different events, green cars, riding, electric vehicle readiness planning. The APCDs have charger funds to get chargers installed, talk to workplaces and cities and condo associations, look for more charging infrastructure. So we're here for you to drive electric. So in summary, and then we'll get to your questions. When I talk to people about electric vehicles, they often, mention some big challenges or drawbacks. And the biggest is, hey, it takes so long to charge. I'm used to fueling my car in 5 or 10 minutes at a gas station. And it's really just a different mindset. Really, it only takes 30 seconds to charge my car because I just plug it in and then it charges up while you're at home or while you're sleeping at night. And most of that 90% of charging happens at home. Very little will happen in the public domain if you have home charging access. People also say, what about the limited range? Those first electric vehicles, only 70, 100 miles of range. This isn't an issue at all for plug-in hybrids because you have your electric range and then you have your hybrid engine. And then, the longer range battery electrics with 200, 300, even 400 miles of range can work great for a single car household, definitely for a 2-car household. And then many people have a misconception that EVs are really expensive. I hope you've seen from the different incentives that you can even get in a new electric vehicle for under $20,000, which is about Toyota Corolla price. So they're not expensive anymore. So compelling total cost of ownership, reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by 75 to 100%, zero tailpipe emissions, can refuel for a third to half the cost. There's more charging solutions everywhere, and they're just really fun, and it feels great to be part of the solution. So the time is right now to get the word out about the EV era. Here are some of the best resources. Electric Drive 805 you've heard about. caranddriver.com/EV has all the different electric vehicles, so you can read reviews of them. Plugshare.com is the one I told you about with all the different charging stations. And then this last one has all the different electric vehicle leases in one place, so you can kind of see about how much the different leases would be. Remember, this presentation and the video will be emailed to you, so you'll be able to get all of these resources and peruse them at your leisure. So we also have a Facebook group where you can ask questions and get the latest EV info. Electric Drive 805, search for that Facebook group, and you can sign up at the website for EV updates. All right, so now we're going to get to some of your questions. Oh, and this is me back in 2012 when I first got my Chevy Volt. It's been a great journey, and I hope that you will join me. And so we have one last poll on EV adoption. Let us know if you still need to learn more about EVs, if you're definitely going to get an EV, if you're still considering one. And in the meantime, we will get on to some of the questions. So I have a question from Frank, and he says, does the battery deteriorate over time, meaning less miles on a full charge as the vehicle ages? And so, yes, the battery does slowly deteriorate. Most of the warranties on a battery are for 100 to 150,000 miles. So the manufacturers have designed the batteries to last the lifetime of the vehicle. So they should last 200 plus miles. And in fact, many Teslas that are still, that have hit over 200,000 miles still have the original batteries. And I know for Tesla, they're seeing about a 10 or 15% degradation after that 200,000 miles. So very small degradation. Some of the other companies don't have quite a good battery record there. But you can search about, how long might the battery last. I'll be honest with you, this is all new because many of these electric vehicles have only been out a few years, 5, maybe 10 years at the most. And some of the earliest Nissan Leafs in the first few years did have some battery problems. Much of the newer cars are much better manufactured, but definitely think that if you're worried about the battery, to get a used car that doesn't have too many miles, or if you get a new one and have that 100,000 mile warranty that can last you for many, many years. We also had a question about, can you address the issue of the carbon footprint? Oh, and we have the poll results. 49% are definitely getting an EV, 35% considering one if it meets their needs, and 10% need to learn more. 5% already have an EV. Okay, so for the batteries, so a small EV, like, and I want to preface this with, there's a lot of life cycle studies on batteries and manufacturing in EV versus a gasoline vehicle. And what they found is that 80 to 90% of the energy and carbon dioxide use happens in the using the vehicle. So the 10 to 20 years of driving it. Only 10 or 15% of that life cycle emissions happens in manufacturing it. So for a small EV, that would be about 1 extra ton of emissions. A large EV with a really big battery may be 6 tons. So here in California, after driving your EV for 3 to 8 months, so maybe a few thousand to 8,000 miles, you basically pay back those life cycle transportation or the manufacturing emissions. And then for the next 10 or 20 years, you'd be reducing your greenhouse gas emissions 75 to 100% over a gas car. So this gets to another question that someone said, was saying one of their students said that they should buy a used gas car rather than a new EV. And I think that's entirely wrong, because your used gas car will use 5 tons of carbon every year, whereas the EV only adds 1 to 6 tons of carbon in the manufacturing. So once you pay that back, you'll have much lower emissions, as well as no tailpipe pollution. Let's see, some other questions. Steve asked, does the federal tax credit roll over to the next tax year? No, it does not. So you need to have that $7,500 of federal tax liability in 1 year. Another way to get around that is to buy a used EV that is depreciated and has that tax credit taken out of it, or to lease an EV, and the manufacturer will take the credit, and then you can, if you want to buy it after the 3 years, you can get a much lower price. Let's see. Someone asked, Dennis asked, when will solar be integrated to the surfaces of EV vehicles? As you could see from that picture of the solar array, you need a fair amount of solar panels. So it's so there are some EVs with small solar panels to run a fan, but it's much better to put the solar on your roof of your house where it's in the sun all the time, rather than your car, which may be in the shade under a tree, in your garage, and not be getting electricity in it. Linda asked, what would happen if you run out of a charge in the car and not near a charger? Same thing as what would happen if you run out of gas. You would have to call AAA or someone to come and give you a tow, or they do have portable EV chargers so that they could charge your car up. You could get to it the next charging station, just like they would bring you some gas in a gas car. We have some questions about incentives, and I would just ask people, everyone's situation is different, to go to Electric Drive 805 and click through to the program details. Richard asked, when I had rooftop solar installed on my home in 2015, the number of panels allowed was restricted by my prior electrical usage. If I get a plug-in car, might I increase the number of rooftop panels? Yes, you could add a couple kilowatts like we talked about. John asked, is there a cost for public charging? Yes. Many public charging stations cost anywhere from 20 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's like $2 to $4 per gallon gas. There are many that are also free in different parts of our various communities. So you can go to PlugShare and find where the free charging stations are. Linda asked, what are the maintenance costs for an EV? As we saw from that Consumer Reports study, you don't have to do any oil changes or spark plug changes. There's very little maintenance costs for an EV. In fact, in the 3 years I've owned my Tesla, all I've done is replace the windshield wipers once. No other maintenance. Hildy asked, how long before either solid state or aluminum batteries become available for cars? So there are newer battery technologies that are being developed, and we expect that electric vehicles will keep continuing to get higher and higher range and more affordable pricing. Probably the incentives will go away though. So I think that electric vehicles right now are, very compelling compared to a gasoline vehicle, especially with the incentives and the lower cost for charging them and maintenance. So I would definitely encourage you to get an electric vehicle now. If you're worried about the battery or that you want to get a solid state battery in the future, you could just also lease one for 3 years. Many of the incentives are available if you just lease for 3 years. And unlike most cars, I wouldn't recommend leasing because you're basically renting the most expensive 3 years of its life. But with an EV, because you get so many incentives, you can actually get a very affordable lease, particularly when you also put in your gasoline savings. So I think that we are getting down to maybe where I could ask or answer one more question. Richard asked, what is the impact on vehicle mileage from the use of AC or heating in the car? So heating actually has a larger impact. And in fact, most electric vehicles have heated seats so that you can heat yourself rather than heat your whole car, or you can heat your car also and just not use as much energy. But it depends on how cold it is. Obviously, you may see a range penalty depending on how cold it is, anywhere from 10 or even 20%, probably the guy in Michigan. AC has a much lower range penalty. Luckily here in coastal California, it doesn't get too hot or too cold. Richard also asked, are there efforts to standardize charging hookups? Yes, so all electric cars can use the same level 2 charging, J1772 it's called, even Teslas with the adapter that comes with it. For fast charging though, there's a couple different standards. There's Teslas, and then there's all the other electric vehicles can charge on what's called combo. So it's a long conversation. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We just have a couple minutes left, and I definitely want to get all of you out by 8 o'clock. I would really like to thank you all for tuning in to CEC's webinar series. I would like to also thank our sponsors, Marburg Industries, Cox Communications, Central Coast Community Energy, and Edison International. Look for a follow-up email in the next few days for recording, as well as all these other resources and the PowerPoint presentation. And know that free events like this are just one of the ways that we work to advance rapid and equitable solutions to the climate crisis. We're one of only 5 nonprofits in the county of Santa Barbara to hold the highest ratings possible on both Charity Navigator and GuideStar. So you can support CEC's critical work. You can donate at this website here, cecsb.org/give. You can also text give to this number. Learn more about CEC on our website. Hope you'll sign up for our email list and get our e-news. And I really hope that you'll go electric. If you have more questions, you can join our Facebook group and ask them away. There's a great community of folks on there that may answer your questions, or I or other CEC staff could as well. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to connecting with you again soon. Take care.